Thank you all for coming. Hopefully what I've got to say is of interest to you. I'm going to talk very specifically initially about innovation within DuPont. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to be a $30 billion company to do innovation. What I'm trying to show people is that innovation is the lifeblood of an organisation if it wants to live for 208 years, and that's how long DuPont's been around. And these are the three waves of innovation that have driven the DuPont company from its birth in 1802. The first was explosives, and DuPont was pretty much an explosives company until the early 1900s, 1910, 1914. And then we started to get into chemistry and polymers, and we grew a second time. And those industries reached maturity and are now starting to taper off. We've just entered our third wave of innovation, where we're looking at integrated science, chemistry, biology, and more into material sciences. I'm going to talk more specifically about a lot of these as we go through. These, and all companies have them, whether they're the same, whether they're slightly different, that's up to the companies. But these are the global trends that we're seeing that is driving our innovation. So growth in developing countries, increased food production. How are we going to feed 9 billion people? Renewable energy and materials, and DuPont is one of those companies that, whether you believe in greenhouse or not, we do, and have for about 20 years. Greater safety and security, and increased connectivity. The technology directions that we're working on now are more and better food, renewably sourced materials, alternate energy, safety and security, energy efficiency, and improved connectivity. Does this mean we're picking winners? It does absolutely mean we're picking winners. You can't do everything. You've got to pick where you're going to go. We put science to work, solving problems in a way that make people's lives better, safer and easier, and we make money. And no bones about that. We are not a philanthropic institution. We are there to make money, but we are also there to make the world a better place. I've worked for the company for 37 years. I have a firm, absolute belief that the DuPont company does want to make it a better world, and that's why I've stayed there for 37 years. So what do we spend? We spend about $1.7 billion in technical spend. About $1.3 billion of that is R&D. We've got 27 R&D centres now scattered around the world, and worldwide we have about 5,000 scientists and engineers committed to that technology growth. We have some goals. We want 3% top-line growth from our technology year over year. And right now, 39% of our revenues from products introduced in the last 5 years. 1,400 new products. Ellen Kuhlman, who's our news chairman, has set the technical community a new goal, and she wants 45% of all products under 4 years old in 3 years. So we're working on it. The research structure is in our what's called CR&D, which is our central research, which is funded by the corporation, where we do a bit of blue sky, but we're increasingly farming out our blue sky effort to universities, to CSIRO, to external research organisations. We're doing less and less of that blue sky research. One of a DuPont scientist got the Nobel Prize for his work on crown ethers many years ago. So, we used to do really fundamental research. We're not doing much of that anymore. We're farming it out. And then the more focused research of about $100 billion is happening out in our businesses. Now, that more focused research has either taken something that's come out of CR&D or something we've brought in externally. DuPont has a new word in the research community. We call it the collaboratory. So we're getting more and more collaborative research partnerships with folks outside because all the brains don't exist in DuPont anymore. And it's an interesting change. The core of our research is our central research facility. It was established in 1903. There's 3,900 people there. And it has that $300 million budget. Now, there are at least one person sitting in this room I know has been to our R&D facility. It is well worth seeing. We've introduced the new concepts to this whole R&D area of productivity and the role of innovation. So we use tools that would never have been used before. And I can go back 37 years when the guys at the station decided they're just going to work on this, and the company gave them a bunch of money and away they went. And 6 years later they might say, oh, well, it didn't work. Those days are gone. Those days are gone. What do we look at in innovation? It's not just new chemistry and new science, it's process design, improved energy and efficiency, and I'll talk a little about that. Increased uptime. How do we get the term within DuPont is how do we find the plant within the plant? And we've been very successful at that over the last 10 years. And next generation process technology like critical CO2, the use of bioprocesses instead of starting stuff from oil, start from cellulose or sugars. The 2009 impact of that was we reduced fixed costs by $1 billion and we reduced working capital by $1 billion. That's innovation. That's innovation. You're putting your money to work. Don't take this narrow definition of innovation that thinks, well, we've got to take this piece of science and turn it into a product. That's not the world we live in today. To give you an idea of how the change has happened in the last 10 years, 2000, we had about 40% of our technical effort within the SBUs. Revenue from new products was 22%. It was competency-based, and we had like 4,000 projects going on at any one time. To 2011, 65% of it's now in the SBUs. The number of patent applications has gone up. I actually have some more recent data than this. The current number's now over 2,000. The revenue from new products has gone to 42%. This is innovation. We're changing, we're growing. The central lab now has what we call Apex projects, which is a bit like the ARC grants. So if you want to do a research project on X, then you put in a proposal to R&D management, and everyone else puts their proposals in, and there's $300 million there, and that gets divided up by those projects that have the most merit, the most technical merit, or the most business-focused merit. And within the SBUs, we've cut the number of projects from 4,000 to 75. So where do you put your effort? Where do you focus your effort? We have what we call our innovation framework. So it's market relevance, technical uniqueness, a commercialisation plan, and it's based on what we call an attraction index, which is our confidence level in being able to achieve the aims we want to achieve, and what are the gaps we've got to fill. What are the gaps we've got to fill? So, there's the sort of stage gate we go through to make these decisions. And then we have a stage gate process once you start your Apex project or your top 75. They've got to meet their stage gates. And to give you an idea of the numbers, we start with about 3,000 proposals. This is over about a 15-year time frame. At the end of the process, we end up with 3 products, 2 of which will succeed. 1 will fail. And to give you an idea, we started a collaboration with one of the universities here. It was about 7 years ago. It was on an agrochemical that had, if we could make it work, really great potential. But from day one, it had a real tox issue. It was incredibly carcinogenic. Now, we knew that right up front because we did the screening tests. But we thought, well, we can analogue around this. And we spent nearly 3 years and $60 million trying to make analogues. And we made lots and lots of analogues. The trouble was the analogues that were non-toxic or non-carcinogenic were not efficacious. And the ones that were efficacious were all carcinogenic. So after 3 years, we failed the stage gate. We killed the project. Some people say we'd burnt $60 million. I say that's R&D. If your R&D success rate's 100%, you're not doing R&D and you're not innovating. You're taking the safe path every time. Do we worry about that? No. The university worry about it? No. We actually gave them all the intellectual property back. All the IP, all the patents, all the analogues, gave it back to the uni. They're still working on it. And if they're successful where we weren't, they'll come back to us. This is just a different way of looking at that portfolio. So you've got your Apex portfolio there, about 20% of the funding. It's corporately funded. It's tied to strategies, mainly to those 5 strategies I said right up front. It's high challenge. In other words, it's high risk. But it's high reward if you can pay off. The other 80%, as I say, is funded by the SBUs. It's generally tied 1 to 5 year timelines. They don't expect you to come out with a product and make money next year. There's still patient money there. And it has this laser focus now on the top 75. So, you start down here with your feasibility, and projects about 35 of those right now. You're not spending a lot of money, and that's relative, by the way. That could be tens of millions of dollars. Your focus research and your value confirmation, we've got about 15 projects in that right now. You're starting to spend a bit more money. And then you reach intent to commercialise. Currently we've got 5 projects there, and now we're spending serious money. You can be in the hundreds of millions of dollars at this point, that top point. And of those 5, only 3 will make it and 1 will fail, of those 3. This is where it gets interesting. It's showing the way the DuPont company is changing as per that first graph. Where are we spending our R&D dollars today? And I've got 2 graphs, there's this one and another one. So roughly 12% is going to crops, 8 odd to crop protection, electronics and imaging. I mean, you wrote those. Aramids, Tyvek, fluoro products, surfaces, and our traditional businesses, the businesses that were in that second wave that made the DuPont company what it is today, between all of them, less than 2%. Targeted spending. Grow with the times. These are the sort of message I'm trying to get through here. Don't be fixated on doing what you always did. You will fail in the long term, in my humble opinion. So, there's some numbers there. I'm not going to go through them, but basically, what the pipeline values are, discount them by 40%. There's still about $10 billion of potential growth there. 2012 potential, in other words, this is you're talking now about your SBU programs more than your CR&D programs. That's about $4 billion we're saying we're going to generate next year from new products based on the way we're currently looking at that. You've got to create value now and in the future, so it's no good doing an R&D with a focus on 1 year, 3 year, 5 year. Some of our projects are focused out 15, 20 years. There's projects I know of right now we won't make $1 from. I'd say we'd be lucky to make $1 from them in 15 years if they ever reach commercialisation. But if they work, we'll make a lot of money. So, above trend line growth in the short term, so we're looking to ag, chem and photovoltaics to generate that. It's a public number now, but we had forecast that our sales into the photovoltaics industry would reach $1 billion by the end of next year. They reached $1 billion in August of this year. And that's a published number. It's in our third quarter report, annual report to shareholders. Ongoing productivity enhancements around manufacturing, process control, process technology. A lot of this is, keep pressing the wrong button. A lot of this is focused around cleaner technologies, reduction of waste, energy efficiency, greenhouse gas emissions, reducing them, water, reduction of water. We have commitments in some of our plants in water-stressed areas of the world, and these are not negotiable. You know, the plant managers have been told, reduce your water usage by 90% by the end of this year. It's not negotiable. You will do it. And we will do it. They get, you know, when the acid's put on them, they get very creative. And we've got some very good people to help. Transformational technologies for the future. Fuels, materials, specialities and seeds. I've got a lot of good friends in DuPont who worked for a chemical company who've left DuPont in the last 10 years because they say we've become a seed and feed company. That's not quite true, but we're not the big monolithic chemical company we were many years ago. And we are putting more efforts into seed and feed. Nanomaterials, we've got major efforts on nanomaterials. Is DuPont going to release a product with nanomaterials next year? No. 5 years' time? Yeah, probably. But not in the near term. So we're looking for what we call sustainable growth through science. Where do we source technology? Anywhere in the world where technology is of interest, is world-class or global expert is in residence. And I'll talk a little bit more of that later about some of the people that are in this room. Where it's cost competitive. So we've just opened labs in China and India. Why? Because we can get very good people at a third the price of what we pay in the US. Do we do sensitive research in China and India? Not on your life. Not on your life. But we do targeted research in those countries. A lot of the business R&D is going into China and India. You won't find a lot of work on advanced materials or biofuels or any of those things. We're not that stupid. And why do we look externally? And it comes back to what I said earlier on. Technology development's globalised, and it has. You know, closing of the knowledge gap is almost zero these days. It's 1 or 2 years, if you're lucky. It's about speed to market. And innovative thinking is not bounded by internal focus. And it's a shame to admit it, but DuPont, for many years, had a not invented here syndrome. And that was just plain dumb, and I always railed against it. That's pretty much gone now, because the innovative thinking is not just resident in the DuPont company or in any company. In any company. This is a measure. It's not a measure that we've got. It comes out of the Wall Street Journal, and it's indicative of an innovative company. And if you look there, this is publicly published. This has got nothing to do with DuPont. But they look at the science strength, they look at the research intensity, and they look at the innovation time cycle, or cycle time. And I must admit, to me, that number surprises me. I didn't think we were that fast. I thought we were damn slow. So, but, you know, measured against, you know, there's some pretty good people there. You know, way up in science strength, way up in research intensity, and I could believe those numbers. And it's a nice external benchmark. You know, the results that we've delivered by these changes You know, 42% of our sales, US patents, that number's now increased. The number of filings, that's a very telling number for any organisation. And this is a very important part of it, is how do we handle the people side? And I've actually been speaking to some folks. I was at the Green Chemistry meeting in Melbourne the last 2 days, and I spoke to some folks down there, and I spoke to some folks here today. And it's something that I've noticed in Australia, is that we don't, and this is a very broad comment, and it may not be true for everyone, but the general consensus is that we don't manage our technical people very well. We manage them very poorly, actually. And within the DuPont company, I don't have to become a manager to go up in the company structure. I can stay a scientist all my career at the bench with no one working for me by my technician and reach the same level as a VP in salary and in benefits. Very unusual to be able to do that. Most companies here, and I was just talking to a guy, we were having a cup of tea together not 20 minutes ago. Most people here, if they're a scientist, to move on in the company, they have to be promoted to a manager. Many, many scientists are not suited to be managers, and they're not happy being managers. They want to stay at the bench. But they can't progress their career because Australian companies, not all, but most Australian companies, for whatever reason, don't understand that if you've got good, competent technical people, you need to be able to promote them within their competencies and not make them a manager. And I've seen it within my own company. Unfortunately, it's changed now, but years ago, where good people were promoted to managers and failed and are no longer with the company. Because no one could make that mental switch and say, hang on, let's put this guy back where he's good. Oh, but we can't pay him as much, he's no longer a manager. You know, get that out of your thinking. We've got to change that. As I say, top performers rise to the level of equivalent to top business performers, and I've got friends in the company who have risen to that level, who have been given the Lavoisier Medal, which is the highest technical achievement you can get within DuPont, who have become DuPont Fellows. You know what a DuPont Fellow can do in the company once you're a DuPont Fellow and you're still in the science? You can do any damn thing you want to. No one tells you what to do anymore. Now, we don't have a lot of DuPont Fellows. Right now, there's about 12. But they can go and research on whatever they want to research on. And they're getting paid an awful lot of money. And we get payback from them. They come up with really neat stuff. Awards are both financial and non-financial for outstanding contribution. And once again, this is a message that I try to get to people. And because I am a scientist, it's the message I tell people about myself, is that I am motivated by different things than the guy who's a salesman or a marketing guy. I'm not necessarily interested in a $500,000 salary. It'd be nice, but I'm more interested in being appreciated for my technical contributions, you know, for my knowledge, for what I know. That gives me a buzz. Getting a salary increase, I'll be quite frank, doesn't give me a buzz. It's nice, means my life's a little easier, but it doesn't give me a buzz. And where risk-taking is rewarded. Too many companies, and once again, DuPont, I think we still do this a little. If somebody takes a risk and it fails, they get punished. If you're not taking risks, you're not pushing the envelope and you're not being innovative. We're better at it than we were, but I still don't think we're where we need to be. And many, many companies I know punish failure when you should celebrate it. Now, if he makes some dumb mistake twice, then you punish it. But don't punish it for making one mistake or a series of mistakes that are all different. The classic story in DuPont, it's not in this slide, is a chap who invented what were called sulfonylurea herbicides. He was a very single-minded individual. He knew the site of the mode of action, and he knew we could find chemistry to work on it. And he was on performance review, which in DuPont means you're one step from going out the front door. He was on performance review. And then he made the breakthrough. It led to the sulfonylurea chemistries, which took herbicide dosage from kilograms per hectare to 5 grams per hectare. Made the company billions. They named a laboratory after him, and he got a share of those profits. And I said to the R&D director, just after he retired, I was talking to the then current R&D director, and I said, you know, I knew this guy, he was worse than me. I'm viewed in DuPont as a rebel. He was worse than me. He was a real rebel. I said, you know, Russ, you know, if you're employing someone tomorrow, who are you going to take? The troublemaker or the conformist? Oh, sorry, I said the non-conformist or the conformist. He said, after this episode, I'll take the non-conformist every time. So, you know, don't be afraid of taking on the non-conformists. You've got to learn to manage them. You manage performance and reward. Within DuPont, at least in Australia now, we have an innovation we have a very structured performance review system. You sit down with your boss every year and detail what you did last year and what you can do next year and what the targets are and the measurements. Everyone in DuPont Australia now has an innovation, what we call COT, in their performance review. We're trying to encourage even the people in finance. You know, they can think up funky ways to do things in finance that do things better and cheaper and safer. So it's even everyone's. You've got to encourage people all the time. You know, encourage failure. You know, people get down when they're not having successes, build them back up, and reward, reward, reward. Now, and there's lots of different ways we do it in DuPont now. We have the performance review system and the salaries. I have the authority to give up to, I think it's $50,000 right now. If you did something really outstanding in your job that was beyond the scope of your job, I have the authority to give you $50,000 for doing that. Now, have I ever given away $50,000? No, but I have given away 10. And I've given lots of 3s and lots of 1s, and not necessarily for technical achievement, but for doing other things. So, you know, there's more than one way to reward people. And they really appreciate it. You know, for $500 or $1,000 reward, and you give them a certificate in front of their peers, it really builds people. It really does. So that's the end of the formal talk. Now we're going to go on to the informal talk, where I'm going to talk about innovation in Australia. I think we as a country underestimate our ability to do things. Now, there's 2 gentlemen sitting up the back of the room, and I did pre-warn them I was going to do this to them. There's Ezio Rosado from CSIRO, and Ezio we started work with over 20 years ago on some technology that Ezio invented and we invented at the same time. And Dave was at CSIRO at the same time, and it's Dave Solomon, sorry. These 2 gentlemen just got the Prime Minister's Medal for their contributions to science. Ezio was made a Fellow of the Royal Society last year. He was voted number 18 of the top 100 chemists of this decade. You know, that's out of Australia. Yeah. So anyway, we started this work, and it went on, and then Ezio came up with a new way to polymerise polymers. And it was just absolutely novel. It was the most cited paper in chemistry for what, Ezio, 2 years, was it? You can debate that. But it was the most cited paper in the world for 2 years. And so DuPont, we worked with Ezio. We used that technology, for instance, to make a new photoresist for the electronics industry that allows them to make these 93 nanometers, which is very, very tiny lines, which you couldn't do with conventional polymerization, because when you polymerize monomers, you tend to get a particle size distribution that's quite broad. Ezio's and Dave's technology lets you really tighten this up. So what does that mean in 93 nanometers? Well, if you used a conventional polymer, you got these furry lines, which on a microcircuit is not good. But because we could control the molecular weight very, very precisely, we were able to get nice, crisp lines. So that was technology. That was the first piece of technology that grew out of Ezio's raft work. Then we, Cyro and ourselves, sub-licensed it to a major oil company, oil additives company. And last year, I can't remember the exact number, but the royalty payment was 6 figures. There's an Australian paint company that will be commercialising that technology in a house paint, either just before Christmas or just after. Innovations that came out of Australia. There's another one I like to talk about, and it's in the textile, clothing and footwear industry. Everyone knows textile, clothing and footwear is dead in Australia. Well, let me tell you, it's not. There's a company in Geelong called Godfrey Hirst, who's owned by one man who had a vision, Kim McKendrick. And I was with Kim on Monday, and I got permission to use his name because he's normally very shy about having his name put out there. And Kim, in the last 7 years, invested over $120 million in modernising his carpet plant in Geelong. And he ripped out all the old stuff and he put in modern technology. Worked with the government to do it. No doubt the government helped. And he now has probably the most efficient carpet plant in the world, in Australia. That's innovation. You know, he took the risk and it's paid off. There's plenty of those sorts of cases that I know of in Australia where people have done that. You know, great science comes out of Cyro, but it took a DuPont to take that science out to the world. Why couldn't it have been an Australian company? Probably it's difficult because it cost, I don't know, 10 years of research, Ezio, before we finally made it happen. You know, you've got to have patient capital if you're going to do that sort of innovation from scratch. This is a laboratory curiosity into a product that's out now in many products out in the world. It's a great science. The work Dave's and his people and Ezio did on that banknote, that was all done by these guys in Cyro. You know, world first. Not only how do you make the banknote, but then how do you print it? All the security devices that are embedded in it. And even I don't know what they all are because they won't tell me because it's secret. But that technology's gone out to the world, and there are many countries now where Banknotes Australia are actually producing their banknotes. So you know, there's plenty of innovative things here that you can latch onto. You've got to be not afraid to do it, and you've got to have the guts to do it. You know, don't expect the payback in 12 months. It's probably not going to happen. But I have a great belief that you shouldn't touch microphones with your finger. I have a great belief in Australia and in the competency of this country to do things. I just don't think we have enough faith in ourselves, and we need to change that. So that's my talk, folks. I hope you found it interesting. I have a passion for it, which you've probably picked up. I have a passion for Australia. We have great scientists here. We have great engineers. The thing we lack, in my opinion, is capital, risk capital, that's prepared to take the risk. You know, a DuPont who'll pour $100 million into something and it fails. Well, that's why you do R&D. It fails. Thank you.